All right, let me get adjusted here a little bit. Let me do a quick audio check, make sure all is good while I adjust the audio. All right, microphone check, all's good. All right, let's get into it today. There's a lot to read. Like I said, there was a bye week before last week, so I'm behind about a week. I'm trying not to go over the 1 hour limit, so whatever we get done in an hour and move on. Again, if you want details, look in the description box. This is just a read along for my personal growth and for anybody else that wants to join along and listen to the articles from PSLLiberationNews.org in case you don't have time to read it yourself, or in case you just want somebody's opinion at the end or someone to listen to while you work at home or work whatever you're doing. Hopefully this is of some use to some people. I know it's been great for me. It's been helping me commit to reading these articles every week and keep on track. All right, let's get to it. First article for today is on student uprisings from Soweto to the movement for Palestine. Soweto. Let's see. This is by K. Asa, June 16th, 2024. The photo is of a Gaza Solidarity encampment at Northeastern University. On June 16th marks the 48th anniversary of the 1976 Soweto uprising in South Africa that led to the state-sponsored murder of over 176 students. These student uprisings were sparked in contesting the obligation of their schools to use Afrikaans in the classroom, which was not commonly spoken and is a language rooted in the European apartheid state. The youth uprising was decades in the making. The Bantu Education Act of 1953 was a racist compartmentalization of education for Black South Africans by eliminating nearly all schools available to Black children and linking finance of education for Africans directly to taxes paid by poor Africans themselves. Ultimately, these resulted in the separation of white, Black, colored, and Indian people into parallel institutions as such universities and administrative bodies. Between 1954 and 1960, teachers protested the racist segregation and degradation of their education through the African education movement, while students protested against the shift towards removing Black South Africans from white universities in places like Cape Town. After the English and Afrikaans were required by law to be used in the schools in 1974, the Black Consciousness Movement and the South African Student Organization led by Steve Biko were both raising the political consciousness of students across schools. BCM and SASO expanded beyond the student movement quickly, embedding themselves in communities such as Soweto, King Williams, and other areas to create, quote, Black community programs, end quote, which provided the development programs and political education to poor Black South Africans. BCM was a clear presence in media, schools, and tertiary institutions. The growing anti-apartheid sentiment and growth of the movement through these organizations were met with a crackdown from the apartheid state. On June 16, 1976, students organized a peaceful demonstration and thousands marched to form a rally at Soweto's Orlando Stadium. On the way, they were met with large military vehicles with tear gas and later live ammunition. The news of what happened was soon spread through the country, and uprising carried on for over a year. For many organizations against the apartheid government, the Soweto uprising was a shift towards the beginning of the end. The aftermath of the countrywide student uprising heavily impacted the apartheid government and exposed the brutality of the state and inspired many to join the then exiled liberation movements. The liberation movement continued to grow, and eventually the South African apartheid government fell. The student movement today for Palestine. Student movements have a powerful impact on building the consciousness of the people and mobilizing the masses. Just as the Soweto uprising exposed higher institutions roles in maintaining apartheid South Africa, today we see students across the globe standing up against the university's complicity in upholding apartheid Israel. Columbia University students sparked a nationwide encampment movement when they launched their encampment in May, demanding the school divest from all Israeli-related investments from its $13.6 billion endowment. The student demands were met with brutal repression by Columbia administration and NYPD, inspiring students across the United States and later all over the world to start their own encampment. The violence that students were immediately met with for simply protesting genocide exposed the truth behind universities' roles in serving ruling class interests. Administrations demonized the encampment movement. These lies were picked up by the corporate media to prime the public and pave the way for police to terrorize the students and sweep the encampments. But these repressive measures backfired. Community members and even university faculty mobilized to support the student encampments. And they too were met with violent assault from scientists and police. Faculty were subject to arrest, firings, harassment, and expulsions, barring them from ever entering campus again. Just like with the Soweto uprising, these repressive tactics did not stop the international movement for Palestine, but instead lit a fire for more activity and emboldened calls for disclosure of investment funds and divestment from Israel and companies complicit in Israel's genocide against Palestinians. This movement is creating important momentum and precedents. Immense pressure from students, alumni, faculty, and community continues to grow as faculty from across the University of California school systems have taken to going on strike to protest the university's violence against student activities and organizers, against mounting repression from both campus, administration, and police forces. Students are showing their tactical creativity and steadfastness in calling for the end to the funding to the U.S.-Israeli genocide. The facade of the United States as a beacon of free speech and human rights is exposed as a lie, as universities with Biden's backing call violent, murderous police forces for backup and even threaten to deploy the National Guard on their own students. None of this is insignificant. It generates political crisis for U.S. imperialism, and eventually the political crisis will make the backing of Israel untenable. Apartheid will fall. The political crisis that has been heightened by student struggle is not new in history. In the United States, May 4 marks the anniversary of the 1970 Kent State Massacre, in which the National Guard shot 4 students and injured 9 others for protesting in the Vietnam War. The similarities of state oppression from that of the South African apartheid government and the imperialist U.S. government of today are clear. When ruling class interests are threatened, police repression and violence will always be their answer. This tactic does not work in their favor because while the ruling class may assume oppression will scare the masses into hiding it, it only draws the contradiction sharper for many. The people begin to see the ways in which they lack actual democratic say over their government and how their tax dollars are spent. They also begin to realize just how far the capitalists will go to protect their interests. Today, we commemorate the spark of the Soweto uprising, which drew out thousands across South Africa. History shows us that through resistance movements and growing international pressure, apartheid regimes can fall. The Soweto uprising was an advance in the South Africa anti-apartheid movement, just as the student encampments represent a qualitative shift in the Palestinian struggle for liberation within the United States. The youth of Soweto in South Africa and the youth within the movement of Palestinian liberation shows us that wherever there is repression, resistance is a struggle the struggle continues. The victory will be certain. All right, so, and it also shows, my add to that is how the empires or the capitalist systems rather oppress the students, create the segregation, the separation of classes, and impoverish the students so that the education system is set up to fail for them, for the poorest among them, for the working class, right? To keep them as the poor working class, even though inevitably what that leads to is some kind of a movement some kind of a revolution, some kind of an uprising, but they don't care because, and it's not that they don't care, is that this is just the way capitalism and empire works. Because they'd rather do that and gain profits and oppress people than actually fully educate and lift up the working class. Because don't forget, the more the working class are lifted up and empowered, the less that the top 1% can hoard for themselves, the less power that they can hoard for themselves. They'll have to share more wealth and power, like if they don't have enough. So great article here. And yeah, we should always support rising movements that are humanitarian movements. They're leading towards the liberation of the working class, the oppression of the working class. Whenever you see the state mobilize with military action or police action, it's usually not good. It's usually not because people are just rioting just to get free TVs, or just rioting, or just being activists because they want free stuff. People want what is due to them, what they've worked hard for, and they also want the opportunities to work, to be able to work, to have a decent living. All right, we'll move along now. Let me check here the audio again. No, everything looks good. Let me get this a little closer so that this, maybe the mic sounds better if I'm a little closer here. Like, sure, that's it. All right. I could probably go a little bit closer. All right. Here we go. Cool. Let me do the quick audio check. Check. All's good. Cool. I'm back. And we'll move on to the next article here. Who that? Bowman? I hope we talk about him today. All right. Liberation editorial, Juneteenth. Black liberation through revolutionary struggle. June 19th, 2024. Short read here. On June 19th, let me be fair here and read the whole article title. Okay, so the article titled is Liberation Editorial, Juneteenth, Black Liberation Through Revolutionary Struggle by Nino Brown, June 19th, 2024. And the picture is this editorial was first published in Liberation News in 2022. On June 19th, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger and 1,800 Union troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, nearly 2 months after the General Robert E. Lee and the Confederacy surrendered in the decisive Battle of Appomattox to announce that slavery finally ended with the issuing of General Order No. 3. This order stated, quote, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free," end quote. 1865, so long ago. This declaration claimed that there would be, quote, "absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves," end quote. The last enslaved Africans in Texas were set free not by declaration of their freedom, but by the arms of the Union military, who fought loyalist and recalcitrant slave masters who sought to eke out every last drop of labor from their slaves. Despite the result of the war, Black freedom was won through persistent struggle against the slave masters to the very end, all paper declaration and proclamation and freedom aside. Just like capitalism, the workers always try to suck you dry to the very end. It is simply a myth that enslaved Africans were unaware of their freedom and were simply ignorant of the declarations. As a formerly enslaved man, Felix Haywood said at the time, quote, "We knowed that was going on in the war all the time. We all felt like heroes and nobody had made us the way but ourselves," end quote. The ending of slavery was not something to be declared, decreed, or proclaimed. Freedom had to be seized from the clutches of the defeated slaveocracy by Black people acting as agents of their own liberation. The ensuing celebration of this emancipation of June 19th came to be known as, quote, Juneteenth, end quote, a distinctly African-American holiday commemorating the final death blow against the system of slavery in the United States. Last year, Juneteenth became a federally recognized holiday, but deep inequality still exists between African Americans and the heirs of the slavocracy, and in fact, the struggle of Black liberation and freedom rages on, as the massive 2020 rebellions demonstrated. It was this massive Black-led resistance that forced the U.S. government, hand-compelling President Biden, to make Juneteenth a national holiday. But the U.S. ruling class is stubbornly refusing to make substantial material improvements to the lives of Black people in this country. Yeah, it only took them over a century and a half to give them a holiday for it, right? Ridiculous. Anyways, back to the reading. Radical Black resistance and rebellion cannot be extinguished with hollow recognition of a racist history that still haunts our present reality. It is the spirit of fierce resistance to all enemies of Black freedom that we must remember and draw on. Black militant resistance to oppression will continue so long as capitalism exists. The real history and legacy of Juneteenth cannot be bottled up and sold. We must fight to remember and reclaim its radical essence. Across the United States, the fight for some form of reparations for descendants of enslaved Africans continues to gain steam. The fight to abolish the racist police and prison state has made super profits off Black and other oppressed people's labor continues to build. Black workers are leading the multinational class struggle for workers' rights through the organizing Amazon workers from Bessemer, Alabama to Staten Island, New York. Despite the unequal and disproportionate damage that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the Black working class, the continued racist police and vigilant terror and racist treatment of Black migrants, the struggle for complete and total liberation of Black people continues to grow. Black people are not waiting and cannot afford to wait for any declaration or proclamation of, quote, freedom, end quote, from the ruling class. As Malcolm X so cogently put it, quote, anytime you beg another man to set you free, you will never be free. Freedom is something that you have to do for yourselves, end quote. Juneteenth began as a people's history. There were no corporate sponsors or apolitical misremembering. It was a celebration of the militant struggle of Black people fighting for their freedom and humanity to the very end. The Party of Socialism and Liberation recognizes and draws inspiration from this crucial history. We recognize the role of the Black working class played in waging what was known as the, quote, Second American Revolution, end quote, against the system of slavery that continues to play today in the overall struggle of liberation from oppression and exploitation in this country. The struggle for socialism is inseparable from the struggle for Black liberation, and Juneteenth represents this valiant fight to eradicate the vestige of racism and white supremacy. On the Juneteenth, we recommit to the fight for Black liberation in our lifetime. There is my response to this article, what comes to mind for me is it reminds me of generational wealth as well as the systemic oppression, and a lot of people still out there that mumble that there is that racism's over, that we need to embrace individualism, embrace self-autonomy. You know, there's a lot of like contradictory things that people say to try to say that racism's over and your failures are your own and not systemic, because we don't live in a community, right? We're all individuals, live in our own bubbles. No, we're not. We're individuals with individual minds, but we are a result of the community that we're raised in. This is what molds us. This is why generational wealth is important. You have a lot of African Americans that have been denied this generational wealth, even though America was built on their backs via slavery. They were never given their acre and a mule. There's corporations that should have been practically dissolved or fully given to over to Black control, perhaps, when slavery ended. Not only, I don't think any white farmer that owned slaves should have been compensated when slavery ended. No, on the contrary, I think the slaves should have taken over the plantations, period. Those are the ones who should have taken over the plantations for there to be some kind of restorative justice already done back to them. That given slaves back then the land of their slave owners would have been way more justice to the African American people than putting the slave owners in jail or any other kind of punishment. This is why we're strong believers, at least myself, in restorative justice. And it's a reflection of how criminalizing people isn't usually the answer. The answer is rehabilitation, re-education, and actually supporting them and educating them properly and having some kind of restorative justice performed so that those victimized are compensated not only mentally but physically. Most people don't get anything out of throwing people in jail. You might call it justice or punishment, but it really isn't justice. Let's not forget that the laws and the judicial system don't equate necessarily to morality all the time. They equate to what the ruling class calls keeping the gears grinding, right? Keep the gears turning for a profit. That's what this system is about. That's what it's about in capitalism. So it is important to recognize that there's a lot that still hasn't been done to make African Americans whole in regards to the reparations from slavery, from slave labor or slavery. Yeah, so those are my comments and my thoughts on that. Juneteenth, great article. Let me read that Malcolm X quote again. Quote, anytime you beg another man to set you free, you will never be free. Freedom is something that you have to do for yourselves, end quote. Same goes with capitalism. Elections are an illusion of freedom and choice. The movement, the working class movement, will be a struggle in the streets because people in power are not going to let you vote them out, and they're not going to let you vote into giving up power easily. That's just unrealistic. All right, let's move on. Next article. If we aren't back by 4, June 21st. Let's see here. All right, I've read this article. Did I read these last week already? Maybe I read these already last week. Uh-oh. No. I've read this in working class history. Yeah, that's why there's overlapping thoughts here. All right, so let's see. All right, the article. If we aren't back by 4, the Philadelphia, Mississippi murders 60 years later, by Eugene Puryear, June 21st, 2024. Okay, because this is when I read these. Okay. All right. The photo is missing poster of Andrew Goodman, James Chaney, and Michael Schwerner. Credit FBI. Oh, this is a long one. On June 21st, 1964, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, 3 civil rights workers, were murdered by the Ku Klux Klan lynch mob outside of Philadelphia, Mississippi. All 3 were working to end apartheid in the Jim Crow South. The 60th anniversary of their deaths comes as the right wing, the spiritual heirs of their murderers, are engaging in a sustained campaign to pervert and often erase the history of the national oppression of Black people in the United States. We see them today trying to roll back many of the gains that martyrs like Chaney, Goodman, and Schwerner paid for with their blood. Their deaths serve as an example of how deeply embedded the most hardcore hard-right pro-capitalist elements disproportionately rooted in the South and organized by vigilant terrorism are within the capitalist power structure, acting as a brake on progress. That these murders couldn't stop the end of the de jure segregation is a reminder that forces of reaction are not all powerful. The fact that the fight for Black liberation is ongoing is a reminder that they are very difficult to dislodge. Commemorating the legacy of Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner is about more than simply preserving the past, but also reaffirming the need to continue the fight. Freedom Summer. The March on Washington in August 1963 and thousands of other actions showed that Black America was a force that could not be denied, and also exposed the semi-fascist dictatorship in the U.S. South. The soldiers in the freedom movement were focused on breaking up the, quote, solid South, end quote, racist political bloc. Since 1961, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Congress of Racial Equality have been helping local people in Mississippi organize in this direction. The SNCC and Corps workers, quote, trudged up and down dirt roads, sat on porches, went to church, walked into cotton fields, and helped with daily chores, end quote, to deepen their networks of those willing to stand up. By summer 1964, an offensive was on to register as many Black voters as possible, a project that became known as, quote, Freedom Summer, end quote, end quote. This campaign mobilized with college students from the North to bolster movement capacity. In Marion, Mississippi, the local project was headed up by Michael Schwerner and his wife Rita, who quickly came to rely on Meridian native James Cheney. As Freedom Summer began, they would be joined by Queens College student Andrew Goodman. Freedom fighters. Michael Mickey Schwerner was a Jewish Manhattan social worker who wanted to fight, quote, the root cause of poverty, such as racism, end quote. He and Rita, deeply moved by the 16th Street church bombing, decided to apply to CORE for full-time work in the South. In her application, Rita expressed her and Schwerner's hope to, quote, someday pass on to the children we may have a world containing more respect for the dignity and worth of all men that the world which was willed to us, end quote. James Earl Cheney, dubbed J.E. by his family, was the Black son of a construction worker and a domestic servant. From the earliest age, he had been exposed to ritual humiliation, backed up by violence, and visited on people like him. Cheney's cousin and great-grandfather had been lynched. In 1959, at age 16, he was involved in an NAACP youth membership drive and had started volunteering with CORE in Meridian in 1963. Schwerner and Cheney became tight, with the former nicknaming the latter, quote, Bear, end quote. They were like Siamese twins. Quote, they were like Siamese twins, end quote, said another CORE worker of their close relationship. In May 1964, the two spoke at Mount Zion United Methodist Church, one county over from Meridian in Neshoba. Quote, you've been slaves too long, end quote, said Schwerner. Quote, meet us here. We'll train you so you can qualify to vote, end quote. The congregation agreed to host a freedom school. In early June, while Cheney, Vida, and Schwerner were training Freedom Summer volunteers in Ohio, the Klan burned down Mount Zion and beat many of its parishioners because of their connection to the freedom movement. On June 20th, Schwerner and Cheney drove back to Meridian with the first wave of volunteers, which included Andrew Goodman. Andy Goodman came from a left-wing Jewish family on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. As a high school student in 1958, he joined the Youth March for Integrated Schools in Washington, D.C. In April 1964, he attended a, quote, Freedom Week, end quote, event at Queens College. Shortly after, he told his parents that he wanted to go to Mississippi. When his father asked why, Goodman responded, quote, "If someone says they care about people, how can he not be concerned about this?" End quote. The gathering storm. Segregationists were extremely alarmed by Freedom Summer. A massive push by the freedom movement might have just toppled Jim Crow. To protect their fascistic regime, the Mississippi establishment went to the whip hand. In response, the mayor of Jackson, quote, added 100 cops, 2 horses, and 6 dogs, end quote, to the existing 200 troops strong police force, as well as augmenting that with 200 new shotguns, tear gas, and, quote, 3 military troop carriers, end quote. The governor called a special session to double the size of Highway Patrol, who also, quote, stockpiled guns and ammunition, end quote. Intertwined with the, quote, official, end quote, power structure was the KKK. One June 7th, 1964, Imperial Wizard Sam Bowers told a few hundred. On June 7th, 1964, Imperial Wizard Sam Bowers told a few hundred Klansmen that the KKK needed, quote, a secondary group of our members standing back from the main area of conflict, armed and ready to move. It must be an extremely swift, extremely violent hit-and-run group, end quote. The wizard had an eager discipline in the Meridian area, Edgar Ray, quote, preacher, end quote, killing. The preacher told recruits they should be prepared to deliver, quote, the occasional elimination, end quote. He assembled a crew of cops, gas station attendants, large landowners, and petty criminals. They kept close tabs on Core, especially Schwerner in particular. Lynching, Neshoba style. On the morning of June 21st, Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman left Meriden, headed for a meeting regarding the Mount Zion Church burning in Neshoba. Before leaving, Schwerner told volunteer Sue Brown to institute the emergency protocols if they had not returned or phoned by 4 p.m. In the midst of the day, the 3 movement workers learned that the mob who burned down the church were out looking for Schwerner. Not long after 3 p.m., Neshoba County Sheriff's Deputy Cecil Price, a white knight of the KKK, pulled the 3 over and incarcerated them in the county seat of Philadelphia. Price reached out to preacher Killen to arrange a lynch mob. Killen rounded up 2 carloads of Klansmen in Philadelphia for an ambush. Around 10 p.m., Price released the 3 and forced them to drive out of Philadelphia as he followed. Price gave chase along with one of the Klan's cars. Parentheses, the other had broken down, end parentheses. Among the passengers were ex-Marine Wayne Roberts, mobile home salesman James Jordan, and driver Horace Barnett, an auto parts salesman in Meridian. Eventually, Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney decided to pull over. They were bundled into Price's car, followed by Barnett's deep out into the piney woods. Roberts dragged Schwerner out of Price's car, asking him, quote, "Are you that N-er lover?" End quote. In what seems like a last attempt to reason with his killer, Schwerner responded, quote, "Sir, I know exactly how you feel," end quote. Roberts responded with a pistol round into Schwerner's chest at point-blank range. Roberts then grabbed Goodman and shot him in the chest too. Jordan pulled Cheney from Price's car next, shot him in the abdomen, followed up with the headshot by Roberts. Before they shot him, Cheney was badly beaten and castrated. They then packed up the bodies and drove them to the old Jolly farm owned by Olin Burrage, who also owned a trucking company. Burrage had once told a room of Neshoba Klansmen discussing how to handle civil rights workers. Quote, "Hell, I've got a dam that'll hold 100 of them," end quote. The killers used a tractor to bury the 3 in the earthen dam. Goodman, shot through the heart but still breathing, was buried alive. The aftermath. In Meridian, Freedom Summer volunteers waited until 5 p.m. just in case to activate the emergency search. Around 10 p.m., they called SNCC headquarters in Atlanta to report the 3 men missing. By morning, activists had organized a campaign to bombard Congress with telegrams. On June 23rd, the New York Times ran a front-page story about the missing men, capturing the attention of the nation. The National County Sheriff told the media it was all a hoax, a publicity stunt, and that the 3 freedom fighters were hiding somewhere, maybe Cuba. By the afternoon, the burnt hulk of the station wagon Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner had been driving was discovered by Choctaw scavengers. The FBI was essentially part of the Klan's conspiracy. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover did everything he could to not protect civil rights workers and actively worked to undermine and destroy their organizations. Facing crisis, President Lyndon B. Johnson used maneuvers and tricks to put Hoover in a situation where his best option was to acquiesce to Johnson's wish for a strong FBI response. Well over 100 agents were sent to Mississippi, and sailors from the Navy were brought in to bolster the search. They found no sign of Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, but discovered that the local Klan had been conducting a reign of terror. The bodies of Henry Hezekiah D. and Charles Eddie Moore, who had disappeared in May, turned up in searches, alongside 14-year-old Herbert Orsby, found wearing a cord t-shirt, plus 5 other black men who have never been identified. On August 4th, an FBI informant led agents to the dam with the bodies of Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner. By November, the Justice Department took 18 Klan members to trial for a conspiracy to deprive the 3 freedom fighters of their civil rights. 7, including Sam Bowers, Wayne Roberts, and Cecil Price, were convicted. Preacher Killen went free on a hung jury. None of the guilty served more than 6 years. The state of Mississippi refused to charge any of the 18, quote, or anyone else, and parentheses, or anyone else, and parentheses, with the murder. In 2005, an 80-year-old Edgar Ray Killens was convicted of manslaughter. Lessons. While no real justice was obtained for the slain, the lynching of Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner did not stop the toppling of the Jim Crow legal structure. Relatively to the pre-civil rights status quo, this brought significant change to Mississippi. For the first time since Reconstruction, Black people could vote and hold office at all levels, quickly monopolizing most positions in majority Black counties and cities. A burgeoning Black co-op movement allowed some rural Black residents to leverage their collective efforts for greater economic development. Nonetheless, the real limits of this second Reconstruction became clear as the 1970s wore on. The reactionary right wing regrouped and reorganized, launching an attack on social programs rooted in the broad anti-poverty, anti-racist, anti-militarist agenda that emerged from the Southern Freedom Movement and underpinned the radical upsurge from the 1964 to 1975. This counter-revolution of sorts is why in Mississippi, 73% of Black children can live in poverty as compared to 38% of whites. As Malcolm X said, quote, "You can't have capitalism without racism," end quote. The inability of the first or second Reconstruction to put an end to capitalist exploitation set them on the course to be rolled back as soon as capital was capable of counter-assault. Remembering Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner is to recognize the need for a third Reconstruction, a socialist Reconstruction, to address the contradictions that the first and second Reconstructions left unresolved. If we want to honor our 3 martyrs, we must pick up the baton and sweep away the last obstacle to the better world they were willing to die for. All right. And because Eugene is so meticulous, he left references for us here. There's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13 reference links here if anyone's interested in checking out the references. Excellent article. All right. Yeah, but my thoughts about it, again, always have to tie it back to capitalism and how racism are linked together. Um, because for there to be a 1%, for them to have maximized profits, there has to be victims. So that means any kind of victimized minority is related to the plans of capitalism to hoard wealth and not redistribute it properly. And the way they do it is by keeping people uneducated, regardless of race, because an uneducated people is more easily manipulated to blaming other people and diverting blame instead of directing it to the genesis of the issue, which is the ruling class that would rather see poor Black, white, Puerto Rican, brown people, Indian, Native Americans fighting each other instead of all of them joining together to look up to and demand actual true action and changes from the ruling class. So that's why we as leftists have always have to stay united as a working class, as a proletariat class, as a community. This is why, in the end, we always say that the revolution will not be an election. It will not be a political revolution, like Bernie liked to say. It will be a revolution in the streets by people mobilizing, obviously not violently, but in the end, it leads to violence because the ruling class will not give up power peacefully. So violence isn't started or perpetuated by leftist movements, by people that want people to have universal health care or living wages or housing. Violence is always started by the oppressors, which is the oppressors that send in the National Guards and the police to harass and abuse of protesters and activists, as we're seeing in this modern time with Palestine and the activists trying to support Palestinians. All right. We're back. It's 160 years. All right, the next article here. Oh man, there's so many. I'm gonna have to go a little over today. Get another sip. Let me take a look here. Check the audio again, and let's see. Audio check. All right, audio sounds good. Let's go back. Let's push on through. All right, next article. Resistance grows as anti-abortion Dobbs ruling hits second anniversary. Jane Cutter, June 24th, 2024. June 24 marks the secondary anniversary of Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, the Supreme Court case that overturned Roe v. Wade, dramatically rolling back a foundational right for women to legally control our reproductive capacities. Abortion as a federal right was abolished and left up to the states. Where does the struggle for reproductive justice stand at this moment? Just a few days ago, the Supreme Court rejected a legal effort challenging the legality of mifepristone, a key drug mifepristone, a key drug used in medication abortions. Since 2022, ballot initiatives on the legality of abortion have shown the overwhelming popular support for access to this important medical procedure. Meanwhile, countless women have been forced to travel across state lines for abortion care, or are forced to remain pregnant against their will. The Democrat Party continues to use this issue of abortion in an attempt to drum up support for President Joe Biden's reelection, while the anti-abortion movement has even more firmly latched onto former President Donald Trump, who alternates between taking credit for Dobbs, supporting state rights on abortion, and hinting that he would sign a 15 or 16-week federal ban on abortion. However, women abortion providers, allies, and others have stepped up grassroots efforts for abortion access and to politically protect the right to abortion care. Abortion pill ruling. The SCOTUS decision on June 13th allowed mifepristone to continue to be available for use in medication abortions, but the ruling was based on technical grounds. The court determined that the right-wing doctors who brought the case had no standing. Quote, "The decision is good that the doctors don't have standing," end quote, said Dr. Rebecca Gompertz, director of Aid Access, an abortion pill supplier working with U.S. providers. Quote, "The problem is the decision should have said that nobody has standing in this case, that only the women have standing," end quote. The decision leaves the door open for future attempts to ban the drug. Justice Brett Kavanaugh in the opinion states, quote, "Citizens and doctors who object to what the law allows others to do may always take their concerns to the executive and legislative branches and seek greater regulatory or legislative restrictions on certain activities," end quote, he wrote. While not a resounding victory for the legality of mifepristone, a medication that has been deemed safe and legal for many years, it is clear the court, one packed with anti-abortion conservatives who choose to refrain from banning the medicine due to the strength of the grassroots pro-abortion movement, as seen by the many popular votes on state abortion initiatives. In the first year after Dobbs, pro-abortion voters prevailed in every state where the issue was on the ballot: Kansas, Montana, Vermont, Michigan, Kentucky, California, and Ohio. Activists in 9 other states are working to pass abortion protection initiatives in 2024. There is no doubt that support for abortion is strong, even in states that are dominated by the GOP, and abortion rights supporters are able to mobilize politically at the grassroots level. Impact on Dobbs. Destiny Lopez, co-CEO of the Guttmacher Institute, testified before the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, quote, "Access to abortion care is severely restricted in many parts of the country. 14 states are now enforcing total abortion bans with very limited exceptions, and many more have other new restrictions in place. The total number of brick-and-mortar clinics providing abortion care in the U.S. declined by more than 40 between 2020 and early 2024. Quote, "Banning abortions does not stop the need for abortion access, which is why many people seeking abortions post-Dobbs must overcome huge financial and logistical barriers to get care, especially those in states with local or early gestational bans. The number of Americans traveling out of state for abortions doubled from 81,000 in 2020 to more than 170,000 in 2023. States that border states with total abortion bans saw the sharpest increase in out-of-state patients," end quote, parentheses, Guttmacher Institute, end parentheses. A 2020 study estimates that 65,000 pregnancies caused by rape were carried to term as a result of state bans with no exception for rape. Parentheses, Kentucky, Louisiana, Missouri, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, and West Virginia, end parentheses. Women carrying non-viable fetuses and those in the process of miscarrying have been forced to travel out of state to receive necessary care. In Texas, a group of these women fought back, suing the state. On May 31st, the Texas State Supreme Court ruled against the women and upheld the near-total ban, making it nearly impossible for a woman in Texas to get an abortion, even in the face of life-threatening complications. Roe and Dobbs. Dobbs was the final outcome of a slow-motion train wreck. The anti-abortion movement implemented a legal strategy to get a case to the Supreme Court that could overturn Roe. The landmark 1973 decision that was understood to legalize abortion until fetal viability on the basis of privacy rights between a doctor and patient, the Roe decision came down not out of the blue, but in a context of a powerful social movement for women's rights, which itself had origins in the movement for Black liberation and against the Vietnam War. As such, it was seen as not simply a legal doctrine, but a response to changing social norms driven by the struggles for women's liberation. After 1973, abortion's rights immediately faced attack. Despite the lukewarm defense and action of abortions from the Democrats, every presidential election cycle for decades has featured impassioned pleas for pro-choice voters to elect a Democrat who will presumably appoint Supreme Court justice for more amenable to reproductive rights. At no point during the nearly 50 years following Roe did the Democrats move to pass federal legislation enshrining abortion rights. Instead, abortion was cynically used to rally voters and to fundraise for candidates without any meaningful action taken. Can somebody say the squad? Anyways, let me keep reading. There is, of course, much more to reproductive justice in abortion cases. Due to the dire state of capitalist healthcare overall in the U.S., effective contraception is not consistently available, while on the other hand, many people carrying wanted pregnancies are not getting proper prenatal care. Maternal mortality, especially among Black women and other women of color, is at a crisis level, as is infant mortality. Because they are not profitable, labor and delivery units in hospitals are being closed, leaving large regions without a place for babies to be born. Meanwhile, OB/GYN doctors are fleeing states with abortion bans, leaving a shortage of doctors to provide reproductive health care to women. Resistance grows. For the past 2 years, the struggle has been fought mostly on state level because each state has had different laws. But the most recent manifestation of this growing movement is on a global level. Witness the global women's strike planned on June 24th, the anniversary of Dobbs. The action is demanding equal rights, reproductive freedom, and an end to gender-based violence. This action has been picked up by the Women's March and will take place in cities across the U.S. While some leaders of the June 24 action will no doubt promote the idea of voting for Biden to protect reproductive rights, women will come out because they have had enough. It's hard to imagine that an electorate horrified by a genocide in Gaza that has killed thousands of Palestinians, women, and children and destroyed every hospital will hold their nose to vote for Joe Biden on the basis of abortion alone, since he has failed to do much in the face of the biggest crisis for abortion access of our era. Access to abortion and contraception is a basic prerequisite for women's full participation in capitalist society. But women and others oppressed on the basis of gender need much more than what capitalism can provide to achieve our full potential as human beings. It's necessary to maintain revolutionary optimism in the faces of so much suffering caused by the abortion bans passed following Dobbs. We won abortion rights with Roe, not because of the graciousness of some unelected not because of the graciousness of some unelected judge, but because an audacious, independent, radical movement for women's equality in every aspect of social and economic life had created a seismic change. Working class women and other oppressed people are at the forefront of every labor, anti-racist, and anti-imperialist movement today. We must continue to build a working-class women's movement independent of the capitalist establishment to defend our rights and fight for a new system under which we can achieve our full potential as human beings. Well, I'm going to let that ring, but the article's finished. Yes, there's still a landline in this house. In regards to the article, I think it is done ringing. Maybe they'll leave a message. Nope, missed call. All right. So in regards to this article, it was very self-explanatory, very detailed. And yeah, obviously my leftist and stoicist thoughts on the article is, of course, that it should be a woman's rights to choose. I am not going to use some kind of moral judgment on people on their human autonomy of control of their bodies. If women feel that they are not capable of carrying through full labor for whatever reason, maybe because they're 13, maybe because they're 30, maybe because they're poor, whatever the reason, that's their judgment. And they should have full medical access to abort because they're not ready to be parents. Whether it's health reasons, physical reasons, financial reasons, yes. Is it cruel to abort a child right before they're born? Of course. I know there's exceptions there, but like I said, my thought is the same thought I have, like, for example, for mask mandates. I don't support mandates, but I do support educating people so that they are inspired or motivated to use masks if it's something that they find necessary and helpful to them. Obviously, abortions is something way more serious because you're talking about someone aborting a potential child, right? But if they're educated and they are provided with preventive measures, maybe they never have to get to abortion to begin with. Of course, there's emergencies and they should be allowed to abort. And I fully support universal health care, which means contraception, preventive care, prenatal care. It should all be available to people. Food in general should be a right to people. There should be a food line in every city available for anybody, no questions asked, if they want food. I'm not talking about gourmet meals, but just healthy, substantial food, right? So these judges, these laws, this government, the Democratic Party, they're not fighting for you. They're just fighting for your donations. And it's a power game for them to keep their jobs and gain more power. It has nothing to do with them actually helping the people. It doesn't. They are the ruling class. They see you as a working class. They see you as a lower class people that just are working for that profit, for their gain. Honestly, I know it sounds horrible, but that is the mentality that a lot of people have. Some people are just plain greedy and they care about their selves first, their children first, at the expense of anybody else. That's just how some people think. So as a leftist, as a humanist, as a stoic, I think there's plenty of bread for everybody. And if I had children, I don't think my children having the best fruitcake should have it at the cost of the neighbor's children having plain wheat bread. You know what I mean? My children can have cake, and the children next door can have cake too. Perhaps it's not the finest fruitcake, but it's still good fruitcake, right? I hope that makes sense. The mentality of being in a community, mentality of being a leftist, that there is plenty of resources, there is plenty of energy, and there's definitely plenty of people on Earth for people to be worrying about other people's choices, personal choices of having children or not. There's a lot we can go into about the aspects of like morality, religion, but there's full articles written about that. And to learn more about that, obviously you can go into these hashtags here at the bottom of the article, like abortion rights hashtag and women's liberation hashtag. and the article will direct you to a lot more other articles in regards to that. Okay. All right. Let's see what we got here. Let's go into June 25th. I think I can do one more article today because I only read 4 and I'm trying to at least get 5 done every week. Let's see here. I'm going a little long here, but it's okay. It's only a minute read. PSL condemns the arrest of Sudanese Communist Party leader and demands her release. Party of Socialism and Liberation, June 25th, 2024. Photo, symbol of the Sudanese Communist Party. All right, yeah, we need to read this. That's a short one. The Party for Socialism and Liberation, PSL, condemns in the harshest terms the latest repression targeting the Sudanese Communist Party, SCP, and its political bureau member, Comrade Amal El-Zain. Comrade El-Zain was arrested by the Sudanese military on June 23rd and is being held in an undisclosed location without her family or lawyers being able to visit her. As the Party of Socialism and Liberation, we stand in full solidarity with the people of Sudan who have been valiantly struggling for full democratic reforms and a civilian form of government since 2018. Despite the terrible violence and repression at the hands of the Sudanese military, whether it is in the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, or the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, two factions who have continued to repress the people of Sudan following the ousting of Omar al-Bashir in April 2019. SCP has played and continues to play a crucial and leading role in the movement for social and democratic rights since its start in 2018. Following the start of the civil war triggered by the conflict between SAF and RSF in 2023, the attack and repression on SCP has escalated. We reiterate our full solidarity with the comrades and SCP and demand that Comrade Amal El-Zain be released immediately. Free Comrade Amal El-Zain. Long live Sudanese Communist Party. Yep, full support of that. PSL wants everybody to know we're in full support of people that fight for people that fight for the working class, like the Sudanese Communist Party that fight for the working class. Right. Oof, I really want to read this one. I know I said one more, but all right. Well, that one was really short. This one's hot, though. This one needs to be read. My throat ain't parched yet, so I need to read this. It's not that bad. It's not that long. Let me check my audio real quick. Check. All right, audio's good. Video's good. All right. Here we go. Racist pro-Israel campaign unseats Representative Jamal Bowman in December. Racist pro-Israel campaign unseats Rep. Jamal Bowman in Democratic primary. All right. Written by Eugene Purrier and Walter Smolarek, June 25th, 2024. Photo of Jamal Bowman speaks at the launch of a congressional initiative for a Green New Deal in public housing in March. Photo was at Jamal Bowman, New York. All right. Backed by an avalanche of spending by pro-Israel groups, Westchester County Executive George Latimer has prevailed over Representative Jamal Bowman in the Democratic Party primary for the 16th Congressional District of New York. Supporters of the Israeli regime and its genocidal war against Gaza are celebrating this development and hoping that it has a chilling effect that extends far beyond the district. At the same time, those who seek to maintain white racist domination of Westchester County politics, at the core of a decades-long struggle that has been the subject of intense legal battles, are also viewing this as a key win. These two objectives are especially compatible considering that AIPAC has staked its credibility this election cycle on a drive to unseat Black social democratic politicians who have expressed any criticism of Israel. The key advantage Latimer had in this election was enormous. Record-breaking sums of money spent attacking Bowman. In just 1 month, AIPAC, the largest pro-Israel organization in the United States, spent $14.5 million on that race. This works out to about $17,000 an hour. Democratic majority for Israel contributed another $1 million. Never before in the history of U.S. politics has so much money been spent in a single congressional election. Although the money was spent in a Democratic primary, half of the enormous sum AIPAC, parentheses, through its, quote, United Democracy Project, end quote, front, and parentheses, spent on the race came from donors who typically supported Republican candidates. Getting Bowman out of Congress was a top priority for the right wing, both because of his criticism of Israel and because of across-the-board opposition to his policies on economic inequality and racial justice. AIPAC's list of top targets for 2024 also included Pennsylvania Representative Summer Lee, who prevailed over her opponent in April, and Missouri Representative Cori Bush, who faces a tough election in August. Total AIPAC spending in 2024 is expected to amount to around $100 million. Together with incessant attacks on Ilhan Omar, AIPAC's campaign is effectively an all-out offensive to remove the most progressive Black members of Congress. Despite being the target of AIPAC's attack, Jamal Bowman has stood against the Palestinian liberation movement in several important instances, typical of Democratic Party politicians. Most recently, Bowman attacked pro-Palestine protesters who were falsely smeared as anti-Semitic in the media after holding a demonstration outside of a pro-Israel exhibit on June 10th. In the opening days of the genocide, Bowman rejected a pro-Palestine rally that was held on October 8th in Times Square, announcing that he was no longer a member of Democratic Socialists of America, which was falsely identified in the media as the group organizing the rally. In 2021, Bowman voted in favor of U.S. funding for Israel's, quote, Iron Dome, end quote, missile system. Bowman has also endorsed Biden, the facilitator of the ongoing genocide. But to AIPAC, this wasn't nearly enough. Bowman is one of the only handful of politicians in Washington who have condemned Israel's atrocities as a genocide, recognized the apartheid character of the regime, and demanded a ceasefire as well as an end to the siege on Gaza. Bending to pressure in these instances did nothing to cool the anger of the pro-Israel lobby towards Bowman or any of AIPAC's other primary election targets. The existence of a bloc of Black politicians espousing progressive politics who are openly critical of Israel is simply unacceptable to AIPAC and a range of other establishment forces, including leaders of the Democratic Party. It is no coincidence that of the very few members of Congress with broadly pro-Palestinian politics, most are Black. AIPAC is highly aware of the long history of Black-Palestinian solidarity in the United States and desperately wants to avoid unity between the two freedom movements. The long fight to preserve white rule in Westchester. The national and international dynamics at play in AIPAC's attack on Bowman have merged with a long-standing local struggle over desegregation. Bowman was elected in 2020, but since then, the borders of his congressional district have been changed so that it encompasses less of the Bronx and more of the suburbs of Westchester County. Westchester is home to some of the wealthiest and most heavily white areas of New York State. Bowman's district in 2020 was 30% Black and 34% white, but as a consequence is now 21% Black and 42% white, indicating that the electorate broke down along class and race lines. In Westchester, Latimer won 62% of the vote to Bowman's 38%. In the parts of the Bronx that are in the district, Bowman registered 84% support compared to Latimer's 16%. Local officials in Westchester have resisted efforts at desegregation for generations. Bowman's opponent, George Latimer, is part of this racist political establishment. As far back as 1986, a judge ordered Yonkers, parentheses, the largest city in Westchester, and parentheses, to construct affordable housing to reduce residential segregation. But the Yonkers city government defied the order, and Latimer himself voted in 1997 as a county legislator to block the use of municipal land to build the court-mandated housing. The entirety of Westchester County was the subject of another judicial desegregation decree in 2009, which yet again was defied by authorities. When Latimer was elected the county executive in 2017, some held out hope that he would finally implement the terms of the decree. Yet by the time the decree was revoked, Latimer's administration had failed to build the minimum number of affordable housing units, and about one-third of the county's municipalities had failed to repeal discriminatory zoning ordinances. For Latimer's backers in AIPAC, the issue that matters is Israel. But for the section of the electorate that they wanted to mobilize, the key issue was the prospect of Black people moving into their neighborhoods and exercising political power. So the AIPAC-funded campaign actually had very little to do with Israel. Attack ads against Bowman sought to portray him as an, quote, extremist, end quote, who is insufficiently loyal to Joe Biden. Voters were told that they should reject Bowman because he, quote, has his own agenda, end quote, and, quote, refuses to compromise, end quote. One ad attacks Bowman on the basis that the school where he used to be the principal had a, quote, wall of honor, end quote, commemorating Black heroes that included Assata Shakur. Quote, what happened to decency, end quote. The narrator in the ad says, quote, Jamal Bowman put a cop killer up on a middle school's wall of honor, calling the killer a tremendous figure, end quote. Latimer's win in Tuesday's election is a reminder that the forces committed to Israeli genocide and occupation remain a formidable force and even more aggressive than before. Since October 7th, there has been a historic sea change in consciousness, with support for Palestinian freedom reaching unprecedented heights. Far from a taboo issue, solidarity with Palestine is now a strong enough factor in American politics that it could be decisive in the outcome of the presidential election. But these huge advances for the movement have only made supporters of apartheid more aggressive, feeling their grip slipping. The pro-Israel lobby is doubling down, using the favorite tool of the U.S. ruling class, money and racism. As we struggle to end the genocide along with the occupation once and for all, the movement is in solidarity with Palestine should be prepared to wage a protracted fight for public opinion that will inevitably go through many ups and downs before victory. End of article. All right. So this is a huge and great example of how useless the Democratic Party is, including Bowman, including the squad, because they will give you performative victories, but they will actually not fight. They will actually buckle and bend to the actual establishment demands. For Bowman to vote to fund the Iron Dome and then say, oh no, we must stop the apartheid and stop the war on Gaza. It's like, bro, you voted for it. You funded it knowing that they've been doing this for 75 years. And if you didn't know that they were doing this for over 75 years, then what the heck are you doing running for Congress or the Senate? Like, you should know this as a politician. These are the things you're going to vote on, right? But yeah, these electoral politics, these races, they don't really matter. Like, as you can see, when you have even the slightest gain, the establishment will take it away from you. Like, look at what they did with Bowman. They realigned his district so he could lose, you know? And he tried to give them concessions so that he could win them over. He's not going to win them over by bending backwards for them. You need to be honest and truthful to the working class. They respect you more when you do that. Not when you try to say, okay, I guess I could bend a little back on this. No, if something's wrong, just say it's wrong. It's ridiculous with the squad and Bowman and all that. I don't care if they lose personally on my behalf, because I know that they're not going to do enough for the working class. I know that they're not going to make real changes. Their changes and their moves are just going to be performative. And I've come to the terms that this is a downward spiral, a snowballing effect, and a regressive system where we're going to keep losing more of our rights, and they'll give us some trickle-down economics. They'll give us some small passive laws that will make us feel like we have a win. They'll put a statue up to make us feel like we have a win. They'll give us things like Juneteenth, but they won't actually make policies to actually change the structure to make the economy fair and equitable for everybody. This is why we say, as communist, leftist, Marxist, socialist, proletariat, working class, that we are aware that electoral politics isn't going to get it done, that it's going to be people mobilizing, people protesting, people doing general strikes, people actually joining together, that is actually going to do the most change and impact for our society. And that is when it's going to get violent, not because the activists make it violent, but because the capitalist empire is actually going to show its true face, and it's going to try to oppress people like it has before. Okay, cool. So these are my thoughts on this article. Everybody have a great rest of the weekend. I know I went a little over today. So we'll pick up next week on June 26th. Imperialism comes to Haiti with a black face. Man, that's a good one too. I wish I need to try to stick to only 1 hour a week. I went a little extra today, just to try to catch up. So tomorrow we'll have the 4 plus the 5. Maybe I'll try to get in 6 if it's if possible, or who knows? Maybe tomorrow will be a 2 hour. But so far I'm trying to keep it to around 1 hour, and I think it's been a little bit over an hour now. So we're good. Everybody have a great weekend. If you want to read these articles, please link on the description box. The link is there. Please support Liberation News, support the movement, and solidarity. Have a good day, comrades. Good night.